All right, well, the internet has been terrible here today, so I'm going to record some steps locally and try and make a bit of progress to cobble together what I would have hoping to talk about in this hour and actually make some progress on this project and give you something to watch later. Apologies for, if you had questions and were joining the stream and weren't able to make it. Hopefully Comcast will be nicer next week. All right, where were we? Let me get my head back on straight. So I was trying to finish this process up by describing installing requirements, installing Django to get the project even started. And that led us to this stage of using pip tools and creating a requirements include file, which is going to be the things that we want in our application, and using this pip compile command to generate the requirements txt, and that will be every package that we need installed. So there's a difference. There's in the semantics there. So the requirements include file you can think of as the logical levels. These are the things that you truly depend on, you intend to import. Requirements txt is everything else. So if you're using one package, like let's pick an easy target like requests, and request has some sub packages to it. So you are probably not depending on the car data or package or whatever else request wants to install. It's unlikely that you're depending on that directly, but you want to be able to make sure that that version is locked down so that whether you deploy today or you deploy a couple of years from now, your installation will still hopefully be workable. So that's the whole goal of pip tools, and that's why I'm using it. I didn't really explain that well, but that's what pip tools accomplishes. And we've got everything in place to get Django going. We're going to use Django 3, which is awesome. We get to start getting some nice benefits of that. I don't imagine us using any of the async features that will be rolling out of Django, but who knows? Maybe that's in the cards in the future. Time will tell. Okay, so let's. I went ahead and actually restarted in the attempt to get my networking going, and it just proved that it's not my computer. It's the actual connection with Comcast that seems to be slow. To verify that, I checked on my phone too, and yeah, I don't think I can save that tonight. So hopefully this recording will get up on YouTube, and you'll catch this later and be able to gain some knowledge here. Especially as this is like the kind of foundational piece of the puzzle that I hope will be recorded. So I've activated the virtual environment where we're going to install the packages, and it looks like I did, as the very last thing that I did before things went haywire, I did install Django. So Django should now be available, and you can see there's the Django admin command. I think that's the only one, yeah, which we will use to start the project. So I'm going to pause here and go ahead and add these things to source control, because this is the base, and everything we do after this is adding more stuff to the equation. So let's a GAA is my shortcuts. I use some Z shell aliases to interact with Git, but that's git add -a for all, and that's what my shortcut is. And then we can do GC, which is git commit, to actually do the commit. So we can review this diff, and we can see that our requirements, our development tool is pip tools. Our requirements include file is just including Django right now, and then requirements txt includes everything else. So this will be I'll call this the baseline of Python packages to start. All right. And that's good to go. Let's push that up. You might be able to see, that's terribly slow, and this is a Git push, and it's, a couple 100K. So internet's rubbish. But we shall carry on. So the first thing that you do when you start a project in Django, well, there are a couple of ways. If you follow the Django tutorial and use the Django built-in tooling, the thing that we're going to do is use this Django admin command, and we're going to run a command called start project. It's down here. And that will do the scaffolding of all of the core pieces that are needed to run Django. It will give you a settings file, a WSGI file, which is the web server gateway interface. It's the entry point that a Python web server knows how to talk to your application, and a couple of other files. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds there, but that's the thing that we're going to run from the beginning. And there's a kind of a debate on what is the proper, not proper, but what is a good structure for putting your project together. And if you go to forum.djangoproject.com, this is a new place in the community, you can, I want to say it's even a recent discussion about layout or something like that. Of course, I'm not finding it right at the moment, but it's probably staring me at the face. It's always one of these things where if you're ever streaming, you're ever talking to people, it's somehow really hard to like read a wall of text like this and find what you're looking for. And then you go back and look at it later and realize, hey, stupid, it was right there. Maybe I was thinking of this business logic. It doesn't matter. The point is that there's a certain amount of debate in the community of what is the proper place to do things. And I guess that's the flexibility of Django in this front. If you were to pick up, say, Ruby on Rails, their community culture is very much, they call it convention over configuration. And for them, that means like if things exist in certain places and are named in certain ways, then it will just work. So in order for that methodology to work, there have to be strong conventions. And Django's has some decent conventions, but they're not nearly as strong as Rails, in my opinion. So that gives us some latitude on how we want to structure the project. And I've been thinking about how I would like to do this, and I've been debating a little bit back and forth, but I think I've settled on the idea that I'm going to outline here tonight. So the first thing that we want to do is actually run this start project command. And like I said, that's going to give us the basic pieces to get going. And I'm starting with the help so we can see what goes into it. And you give it a name of your project, and you give it a directory to put it in. But the nice part about this is version control. So I run this command so infrequently that it's okay for just like experiment, and if that was wrong, just destroy the files and try again. Like it's not going to upset anybody or anything to do this multiple times. So we're going to try Django admin start project, and the first point of debate in the community about the structure is what to call the directory where you actually store stuff like your settings file and this WSGI file that I mentioned and all of that stuff. And I've seen some people want to call it config. I've seen some people want to reuse the same name as the repository itself. So if you look at, since this repository is called homeschool, you'd call it homeschool. I think in the end, I've sort of settled on calling it just project because it's the stuff about the project. It's pretty generic, I guess, but it does seem to follow a basic convention that if I stuck to that, then it would give me pretty much what I want. So I'm going to call it project, and I'm going to put it in the current directory. I think that's what I want. Or maybe I don't even need that dot. Let's try it without first, see what happens. So what do we get here? We've got a directory that is named project. That's exactly what I wanted. and it put it here. But it didn't do quite what I wanted. I really wanted the manage.py file to be in this root directory. And I think that might be important for Heroku to detect that this is a Django project, to keep your manage.py at the root. If you're fairly new to Django, manage.py is the Django tool that gives you all of the extra commands that you can use to interface with Django. It's kind of like a local version of this Django admin command that we ran. So I don't think that's what we want. We're going to remove that project directory and try this again. So I'm going to try it again, but this time I'm going to use a dot, importantly, at the end, and see what that gives us. Okay, I think that's more in line with what I wanted. So I'm going to add some notes here to the chat, mostly as a reminder to myself later when I make show notes. But we're going to call this Django project, or Django admin start project dot. And let's take a quick peek at what is in that project directory. So there is this settings file that I mentioned, and there's WSGI. This is new. This is ASCII. So the Django project is walking down this path of starting to include an asynchronous model which is intended to be like for high performance sites that async designs work really well with web content. So I don't actually know what's in here. Let's take a look, just out of curiosity, and see if we can figure it out. So we've got a lot of the similar stuff, but the difference is that it's calling from core ASCII to get the ASCII application. So this probably looks remarkably similar to the WSGI file, I would guess. Yeah, it's all the same naming conventions entirely. Cool. Well, there's something new for everybody today that came along with Python 3. So we've got the project directory, we've got the settings file, we've got the URLs file. I think we're ready to even attempt to run the application. And so I'm going to run manage.py, and we're going to use run server and just let it go. See what happens. So this is a predictable output because we've not run any migrations yet, but it's telling us where it's getting the settings from, and it's telling us that we can visit this URL, and let's do that. And look at that, we've got a successful install of Django. So if you've never done Django before, hopefully that makes you kind of comfortable that even though there's a bunch of files that were added there, which we haven't dug into, it was not a lot of work to produce that. It did take some fiddling to get right, and I bet a lot of people would get caught by including that dot if they've already got a repository. But yeah, we didn't get caught by that. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and commit this as is. And I'm doing that for a very specific reason. Anytime you get this generated output, there is a strong temptation to immediately start tweaking things about it, tweak little settings values and change this and change that. I really like committing exactly what was produced by the tool so that when I am looking through the Git history and looking at changes, I never have this mysterious point of I might have changed something at the same time as a bunch of generated stuff. And let's make that a tiny bit more concrete by looking at a file and imagining if we had made a change. So here's this generated settings file. And we can imagine that we want this, we want to go ahead and remove this secret key from this file. Because as you can see from this big security warning here, you don't want to commit this stuff and then use it on a real project, because if somebody can access this, they can wreak a lot of havoc on your system. So it would be a totally reasonable thing to say, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. I'm going to go ahead and pull it from the operating system's environment variables or wherever you're going to get your settings from, and just take action on that right away. But by taking this step of committing this stuff first, we get a very clear separation between this was generated and this is not generated. So we're going to say, we're going to commit this and call this add scaffolding output from start project. Okay. So I think before we get into any business logic at all, it might make sense to even get this much up on Heroku. And go ahead and switch ourselves from using manage.py and run server to using Heroku's specified way of doing things. Heroku, as I mentioned in a previous video, which you may not be catching because of this recording, is a platform as a service. And that just means that they will run my application for me. And they'll do a lot of the work for me as long as I follow some of their conventions. And Heroku, it has a higher cost in like sheer number of dollars in the short term, but what it buys you is a lot of time that you did not have to spend doing this yourself. And if you value your time and think about what it costs, what real software development time costs, like in the industry, this can be a massive savings. And on top of that, I'm going to use for a long while the free tier of this. So the cost will be a big, gigantic zero. The downside is that means every time I come to this app, when it's been off for a while, it will have to boot it up, so there'll be a delay. But I'm okay with that. Like, we're just kind of we're working to getting the minimum viable product, and that's fine. So in order to interact with Heroku, you install what they call the Heroku Toolbelt, which is essentially something that gives you the access to this Heroku command line utility, CLI. And I know very few of these commands. I'll be very blunt. Like, even though I've gone through the Heroku tutorial and I think it will be great, and I've heard really good things about it, I don't have a deep experience with Heroku. So that, in a way, is going to be some of the unknown in this project. I'm banking on the fact that it is a high quality tool and has a good pedigree, and going to learn along the way, and you can learn with me. So we've got this thing committed, and we need to figure out how to get it up on Heroku. The first thing that I want to try is, I remember going through the tutorial and I worked from a cloned version. They have a Python application that's already set up, but at one point they mentioned running Heroku local, and I want to run that and see what kind of error it might give out. Okay, cool. It does it. I want to use like error-driven development or failure-driven development to kind of drive out what do we minimally need, and it's telling us. So we're missing a proc file, and a proc file is Heroku's tool for declaring what you're going to run, and it's their information for deciding, like, am I going to run web stuff or worker stuff or different extra kind of processes that you might have. So you have to define this kind of setup. So we want to create a proc file. That's what we need to do next. And I know for a fact that I want to use GUnicorn for this project. And so I want the proc file from what I run locally to also match what is going to run up in production. I don't want to have to mess with different proc files. I'm guessing that's possible, but I just don't want to go there. So that means we need to get GUnicorn, which is a Python web server, installed and running, and then set the proc file appropriately. I'm going to see if I can find the Heroku Python app. If I keep typing, yeah, here it is, the getting started package. So that way we can kind of cheat. It's not cheating, it's just using their reference. I'm going to rephrase that. I don't want to say it like, nothing that we're doing here is cheating. It's just doing it differently, or figuring things out along the way from what they've got. So this is, and the reason I wanted to do this is because I didn't remember the arguments that you necessarily want to pass into GUnicorn to work with, to work in Heroku's mode. So here's, and it's specifically this part right here is a little confusing. So -- log file dash means is a really obscure way of telling GUnicorn that instead of writing your log file to an actual file, that you want to write the log output to standard out. And that is important for Heroku because Heroku's model is every process that runs is intended to log its output to standard out, and then Heroku aggregates all the data, and you can send it off to log services if that's your thing and you want to do that later. But you know, you at least have to make the log output visible. So we're going to follow along with that. So let's go back over to our project, and I'm going to go over here and come back to the requirements.include file. And now we want to add GUnicorn. And I don't remember what version is the latest. So let's go onto PyPI and check GUnicorn. And so we're going to put in 20.0.4. That's what we're going to be for this project, or at least for now. We can upgrade it in the future, but I'm not going to fall into that temptation either. And if I need a reminder of how to generate the txt file, conveniently pip compile gives us this, like, here's how this thing was made. So if you want to recreate it, you can do this. Just copy, paste it. That's very convenient. So we're going to generate a new requirements txt file, and we can see if there's any differences. I don't actually know if GUnicorn, no, looks like it doesn't. So GUnicorn itself does not include any other dependencies, but so it should be a one-line change in both places. The following packages are considered to be okay, cool. Setup tools. I don't know why it's adding that comment now. That's weird. Okay, so we've got this. We've got those things added, and now we're ready to install from our requirements txt file. Whoops. And it's going to get GUnicorn, which I apparently already have cached from something, and it adds it. So at this stage, we can go to, and we can we can create that proc file for the first time. So create a proc file, we can give it the name web, and we say we're going to use GUnicorn as our process, as the thing that we want to run. And now we have to pass it in those extra settings. So if we look back at that GitHub example, their project name is getting started. So this is where I'm going to plug in project instead and use uWhiskey. And this is enough of a path module that GUnicorn will figure out where my WSGI application is. So we'll give it the same log file parameter, and we'll add that important dash character at the end to tell it to use standard out. So at this point, we should be able to run Heroku local again, and this time it will use GUnicorn to start up Django. And you can see that it's already doing something slightly different. It's using port 5000 instead of 8000. But we hit our first error of this project. How fun. Okay, so let's talk through this. So Django expects your allowed hosts to be the host URL where you came from. And if it doesn't, and that's like a list. So if my last site was collegeconductor.com, so my allowed hosts would be a list containing the string collegeconductor.com or something to that effect. What it makes an exception for is if you're in debug mode, it will permit localhost. So 127.0.0.1, the IP address, which will resolve to the name localhost. But since GUnicorn is using the broadcast IP address of 0.0.0.0, that's not in the list of allowed hosts. So Django is blowing up as a protection to say, hey, something's fishy about this. You said, you only want certain allowed hosts to protect yourself. Is this really what you want to do? So there's a couple ways that we could fix this. We could manually go into allowed hosts and set the string to 0.0.0.5000. But that's going to cause problems later on in deployment. But I think that what we really want to do is install a package that Heroku provides to update its settings to work in a Heroku context. And that package is called, I believe it's called Django Heroku. Creative, right? So this is what we need. And it gets us some of these other things too that are kind of nice that we're going to want later on. Static files, white noise, etc., etc. So we're going to follow this. We need to install this thing first. So we're going to do the same little dance for installing packages, which means we go to the requirements include file, and we're going to install Django Heroku, and the version was 0.31, right? 0.3.1, yeah. Okay, and we're going to come out of here, and we're going to do the pip compile command again. And this is going to get some other things for us. Django Heroku, as I mentioned, it will include white noise, which is for dealing with images and stuff later. So if everything went swimmingly, yeah, we can see Psycho PG2, that's for Postgres databases. This is for database URLs. And I'll cover, when it comes time to mess with some of these settings and set them, we'll talk about this. So let's try it out. We want to go ahead and install this now. And hopefully that all works well. So now everything is installed. But before we can use it, we need to come into that settings file. I don't know why I keep closing Vim. I should just leave it open. And if you look at the instructions for Django Heroku, it has this item here, putting this at the very bottom. I don't want to put the import at the bottom, that part's silly, but that's just them so they don't have to put it in two different places. But this is the line that matters. So let's go ahead and add it, and then I'll explain what it is. So essentially, this Django Heroku settings thing is a function that is bootstrapping itself, and it's going to modify the local settings. So what locals does, locals is a built-in to Python. So if we bring up the Python docs, we can go look at it. These are the good things to know how to find. So it's important to be able to do this. So I went to the docs.python.org, and this is the home page. You should get pretty comfortable with this page if you're using Python for a long time. And the thing that you really want to know about is the library reference right here. And under the library reference, which my internet's now going slow again, I just had it up a second ago, there it goes, is where you start to learn about the standard library and the packages that are in here. You can find all of your favorite built-in modules like OS and sys and JSON, and they're all in here. I even wrote a blog. I read this entire thing around the 3.3 era, and which I don't recommend doing. I wrote a blog post about why you shouldn't do that, but I did, and there's just tons of stuff in here to learn about. But what you do need to know about is this right near the top. There's this built-in functions, which will bring up all of the built-in functions that you can access. And here's the one that we care about, locals. So locals' job is to give you every variable that is in the scope that you're in and put it into a dictionary keyed by the name of the variable will be the string key, and give you the value on the other side. So the kind of I'm not sure I'd call it a clever trick, but the thing that people might not understand about this is saying take everything that's in this module scope and put it into a dictionary and then pass it into this function. So what this function will receive is a dictionary that will look like, I'm going to fudge this and then we'll delete it in a second. It's going to have a bunch of values, and they'll be in a form kind of like this, where you can see above the not static URL. So all of the settings that are listed above will be in this one dictionary, and then Django Heroku is going to then modify that dictionary kind of in place, which will update I believe updates the settings locally. I don't know how all that works under the covers, but it's something like that. So when it needs to change things like certain settings, like allowed hosts, it will just do the work for you, and kind of operates a little magically. So it's a bit of magic that in another context I would be not so crazy about, but I'm going to accept it here. And you might have also noticed when I just saved that file, there was a big jump in a bunch of stuff. And this is one change that I will accept in the very near future, is that I use the black code formatter. And so that is going to configure my code so that it all looks consistent. And I'm just going to accept that. So I think if we go to the diff, I'm kind of wondering if I should actually separate this out. Oh boy, I'm already like diverging from stuff that I said I wouldn't do. So let's break this up then. We want to definitely add those requirements files. So let's do that. So we're going to do these little chunks at a time and commit those. And so that added the web server and Django Heroku. So I'll say add packages for running with Heroku. Okay, what's left? We've got that settings file has been tweaked, but it's doing more than I want. So I'm going to actually remove those two things for a moment, and we still got this. But I need to make a little tweak first before we get there. So this is going to be annoying. I use Vim as my text editor, and these SWP, they're called swap files. They're just little extra files that Vim has whenever it runs and has a file open, and we don't want Git to pay any attention to them. So we're going to come into the git ignore quickly and add a new section for Vim. Obviously this doesn't apply to you if you're not a Vim user, but you can see the process here. So I'm saying for any file that ends in SW star, the star is there because sometimes, most of the time, Vim will call it SWP, but sometimes if it can't access that file, it'll call it SWO. Who cares? You don't care. So that just will protect against that. So I'm going to add the project settings, and if we look at that diff, that's black, changing the formatting of stuff. So I'm going to commit that particular file as run black on the settings file. So that shouldn't change anymore in the future, but now we've got that committed. And I'm also going to go ahead and add that git ignore. And I'm doing this in separate commits so that if I ever needed to get down to the history, I can like clearly see when did I modify that aspect of Vim ignoring, or when did I run different aspects of this, and be able to see the actual changes. So we'll say ignore Vim temporary files. And what does that leave us with? I'm going to come back and undo those two deletes of Django Heroku. So now we have this, where it's running the locals. And before I commit it this time, let's try Heroku local here. And we'll come back to our web server. And now you can see Django Heroku is doing a little bit of magic. All right. So I was super curious of like, what in the world are they doing that makes that work? And so I actually got into the Django Heroku source code a couple days ago to figure it out, because it was just interesting to me of why would that work. And it's not a very complex package, and it looks like it doesn't even get modified all that much. And so I got in here, and you can see there's a class there, but here's the guts of it. It's this function starting on line 49 called settings, and it has a fair number of toggles that all default to true. So it's going to try and do a bunch of things for you. And yeah, the one we care about right now is how did it deal with allowed hosts. And you can see what it did was this. It changed allowed hosts to be star. That is convenient and expedient, but long-term may not be the most secure thing that we want. So you can toggle these things on and off. And let's take a second to talk about why is this may not be great. And the reason is star is the wildcard character that basically says I don't care what host it is. I'll accept whatever you give me. So that would be bad news if, for example, some other website decides it wants to start using to like send requests to your server. If you want to lock down your site so that that's not possible without a bunch of hacking or messing with HTTP requests, I should say, then you would want to change this to something more specific that matches your domain. So we're going to permit this for now because, again, we're focused on minimum viable product, and I'm okay with doing this. But you can also see all these other things that it's going to give us, including like database setup. I wonder if it runs migrations. I doubt it. I don't think I'd want it to anyway. Oh, there's some interesting stuff about testing too. That's cool. And interestingly, it didn't actually seem to log those messages, and I'm not sure why. Maybe our logging level is not set up, or the logger's not set up. I don't know. So we would have to dig into that if we wanted to actually see those log messages. But that's what's going on. So now we have Heroku, a Heroku setup, and we've modified the settings to run with that. And we have a proc file to do that with. And I'm going to commit that. So we'll say make Heroku local work. So the next question starts to be, what do we begin to change? What's the right thing to change? In fact, I'm not really sure. I know that like there's one thing we talked about, secret key. Okay. So this is saying like if the secret key is part of the environment variables, to replace the secret key that's already there with that new key. So that's cool. Logging. Yeah, there's a bunch of cool stuff in here. I need to dig into it more. I don't want to stare too much at the documentation. Maybe the next thing that we can do is go ahead and try it on Heroku. How does that sound? Maybe that's a good place to stop for the night. So I'm going to push that up to GitHub, and we're going to bring back the Heroku language guide. So I need some refreshers on what to do. I'm going to skip around through this so that we're not wasting a lot of time here. And we'll see if it'll even load on my computer today. Good grief. So okay, we can just call Heroku Create. So part of this that you won't see here is that in the setup step, it has steps for authenticating. So my local Heroku Toolbelt, or Heroku CLI, I'm not sure what name they're using right now, is already authenticated with my account. So from here, I should be able to do Heroku Create, and it will create an app, which it seems to be doing, with a little spinner thingy. And we have Aqueous Crag as the name for this, which is accessible at that URL at some point. So I'm trying to figure out how we add the remote properly. Oh, cool. So let's look at our remotes. Get remote Nice. It went ahead and excuse me. It went ahead and added the Heroku remote here so that we wouldn't have to do that. So I think now the only thing that is left for us to do is run the git push command. So we want to git push Heroku master. I believe that's the command. Yeah. We can see if we're successful. So it detected the Python app. That's cool. We didn't tell it. Okay, here's a difference already. We did not tell it to use Python 3.7. So locally we've got 3.7. We might need to tell it the specific version of Python we want. But otherwise, it's just doing its thing of pulling all this stuff together. And I think the model with Heroku is it does something called build packs. So this is like a Python build pack, and the output, I want to say they call it a slug. I'm hopefully getting these terms right. But they essentially put together this bundle that then can be moved around and put in different places on the Heroku environment. And in the end result, though, is right here. We get open up Aqueous Crag 22060, and we wait for it to start. And some of this might be Heroku, but some of this might be just my internet today. And there we are. So that feels like a really good note to end on, considering all of the troubles that I've already hit today. So what do? We talked about the project, which I don't know if you'll got that. Maybe I'll revisit that for a moment. I started with that, described kind of the vision of what I want to do here. And then we got down and looked at what is the minimum that we need to get something online, because that is going to be my driver for this entire project. I don't want to get stuck in the weeds looking at little details of stuff. I want to really deliver the product that will matter, that will make my customer, again, my wife, happy to use it. And that is the aim. So we did just enough Django project configuration to get something running. Then we did just enough Heroku configuration to get it to Heroku. Next time, when next we meet, assuming my internet works well next week, which should be next week Wednesday, we will carry on, and we will start our first Django app, and hopefully by then I'll have thought about the first piece. I think the first piece is going to be the ability to log in. Like at minimum, I know I need users, and I know I need to be able to manage user accounts. So there might be just enough like hardening to make sure that what is getting deployed is not, it has all the secret keys and all that stuff put like it's supposed to be. We might also add some additional tooling to be able to inspect stuff as we get along. But yeah, that's the objective, is we want to get users on there so that I could create an account for her. And then we want to just go. So thank you for bearing with me on this unusual recording stream thing today. If you want to catch up with me, I have an online presence on my website, which is listed above. It's mattlehman.com. You're welcome to follow my writing that is there. You can also subscribe to my newsletter, which will keep you apprised of when I do streams, the things that I record at local meetups, the articles that appear on my site, all of the kind of goodness that happens there. If you're interested in keeping up with Python and web stuff, which is mostly what I talk about on the internet. Otherwise, you can find me on Twitch. If you like this, please like or subscribe. Any way you can help out would be appreciated. If you have questions, reach out to me on Twitter. I'm always open to answer them best I can. But thank you for tuning in, and I shall see you all next time. Take care.